Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me get my first 1,000 subscribers. It's one click for you, but for me it's a huge encouragement and motivation. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. Claire's decision to end their marriage did not come with a scream or a crash. It was as cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. When she told Ethan she wanted a divorce, her voice was completely void of hesitation, carrying a terrifying finality that left absolutely no room for negotiation. She sat across from him at their kitchen table, the gray Seattle light filtering through the rain-streaked window behind her. Her posture was rigid, her hands folded neatly on the quartz countertop. The air in the room was thick with a static tension Ethan had not been able to place until she finally opened her mouth. "I see not do this anymore," she said, her tone eerily calm. She was not angry, nor did she look particularly sad. Instead, her expression was one of quiet, terrifying resolve. "I've thought about this for a long time, Ethan. And I think it's time we call it. I want a divorce." For a moment, Ethan was convinced he had misheard her. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. "What?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly on the syllable. "What are you talking about?" Claire tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I'm saying I want out. This marriage is not working for me anymore, and I do not see the point in pretending otherwise." The bluntness of her words hit Ethan like a physical slap to the face. His mind raced, spinning its wheels to understand how they had arrived at this precipice. Sure, they had their share of arguments. Who did not? But was not that normal? People fought, but they worked through it. That was the deal. That was marriage. Or at least, that's what he had believed. "Is this because of something I did?" Ethan asked, his voice rising in panic. "If you upset about something, we can fix it. We can go to counseling, we can try." Claire held up her hands to silence him, a gesture so dismissive it stung. "Ethan, stop. This is not about you doing anything specific. It's about me. I've realized I'm better off on my own." Her words were like a dagger, each one stabbing at Ethan's pride, his sense of worth, and his belief in their partnership. "Better off on your own?" he repeated, incredulous. "We've been together for 10 years, Claire. You see, not just throw that away like it does not mean anything." Her lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile that made his stomach turn. "It's not about throwing it away. It's about accepting that this is not what I want anymore." Ethan's head dropped into his hands as he tried to steady his breathing, staring at the grain of the wood table. "Do you even hear yourself?" he asked, his voice muffled by his palms. "You giving up without even trying to fix things. How is that fair?" Claire's voice grew firmer, as if she were explaining simple math to a stubborn child. "Fair has nothing to do with this, Ethan. I've made up my mind." The certainty in her tone was a wall he could not climb, but Ethan could not accept it. "We built a life together, Claire," he said, his voice shaking now. "What about everything we've been through? Does that mean zero to you?" She stood up, pushing her chair back with a deliberate slowness that felt choreographed. "It's not that it means nothing," she said, turning her back to him as she gathered her purse from the counter. "It's just not enough." Ethan stared at her, his mind reeling. "What do you mean, not enough?" She turned to face him one last time, her eyes colder now, like the Puget Sound in winter. "I mean that I've realized I do not want to spend the rest of my life with you. It's as simple as that." Her words were clinical, detached, as if she were talking about returning a defective espresso machine to Amazon rather than dismantling a decade-long relationship. Ethan felt a surge of anger rise within him, hot and blinding. "So that's it? You just walk away like none of this matters? Like I do not matter?" Claire exhaled sharply, checking her watch as if she were tired of explaining herself to a subordinate. "I'm not walking away, Ethan. I'm taking control of my life." The finality in her voice was undeniable. Before Ethan could respond, she had already moved toward the front door. "I'll stay with my sister in Bellevue for now," she said over her shoulder. "I'll send movers for my things." And just like that, she was gone. The heavy front door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed deafening in the silence that followed. Ethan sat there, stunned, staring at the empty space she had left behind. It felt as though the ground beneath him had given way, leaving him suspended in a freefall of confusion, hurt, and anger. He could not understand how someone he had loved so deeply could discard him so easily, so callously. The realization hit him like a rogue wave. Claire had truly left, and she was not coming back. Ethan's world had shattered the moment Claire walked out of their shared home, leaving behind only the echo of her cold words and the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. The days that followed were a haze of confusion and suffocating silence. Each corner of the craftsman house they had renovated together seemed to mock him with memories of their life. The sectional couch where they had spent lazy Sundays watching football, the kitchen table where they had shared countless takeout meals, now just pieces of furniture in a house that felt hollowed out. He barely slept. When he did, it was fitful, plagued by dreams of Claire standing in that same doorway, telling him it had all been a terrible mistake. But every time he awoke to the gray morning light, reality hit harder. She was not coming back. Ethan replayed their last conversation endlessly in his mind, dissecting every word she had said, every micro-expression on her face, searching for clues. How had he not seen this coming? Had she truly been unhappy for so long without him noticing? The thought was a jagged pill to swallow. He felt like a fool, blindsided by someone he had trusted implicitly. In his more desperate moments, Ethan found himself scrolling through old photos of them together on his iPhone, trying to reconcile the smiling woman in those images with the stranger who had so decisively ended their marriage. They looked happy. She looked happy. Was it all an act? One evening, as he sat on the edge of their California king bed, staring at the empty side where Claire used to sleep, he picked up his phone and typed out a text to her. "Claire, please. I need to understand. Can we talk? I deserve to know why." The message sat unsent on his screen for what felt like hours. His thumb hovered over the blue arrow button before he finally pressed it. The moment it sent, regret clawed at his throat. He felt pathetic. What good would it do? She had made it abundantly clear she was done. The reply came hours later, while he was nursing his third IPA of the night. "Ethan, I've said everything I needed to say. Please do not make this harder for either of us." Her detachment was like ice water poured over his head. He threw his phone onto the couch in frustration, the screen lighting up briefly with the image of the two of them. His lock screen was still a picture from their anniversary dinner at the Space Needle the year before. It felt like a cruel joke now. The humiliation of it all was unbearable. He could not stop thinking about how she had sat across from him so composed, so certain, while he had been reduced to begging for answers. He replayed his own words, the desperation in his voice, and cringed physically. Ethan found himself avoiding his friends and family. The thought of explaining what had happened made his stomach churn. Everyone had seen them as the power couple, the stable, happy pair. What would they think now? That he had not been enough? That he had failed as a husband? One night, unable to bear the quiet, he decided to go out. He ended up at a dingy dive bar across town in a neighborhood he rarely visited, a place he chose specifically because he was unlikely to run into anyone from the tech world or his social circle. He ordered a whiskey, then another, until the edges of his thoughts blurred into a comforting fuzz. A woman at the bar struck up a conversation with him. She was attractive in a sharp, overly polished way that reminded him of how Claire used to look before her makeup-free mornings had given way to quiet complaints about losing herself. The woman flirted, leaning closer, her laughter a little too loud and her hand brushing his arm too often. Ethan hated himself for the way he leaned into it, letting her attention fill the void Claire had left. It was fleeting and hollow, but for a moment, it felt good to be wanted, even if it was by a stranger who did not know a damn thing about him. When she suggested they leave together, he hesitated. The old Ethan, the one who had been devoted to Claire for 10 years, recoiled at the thought. But the new Ethan, the one who had been discarded and left to pick up the pieces, wanted to forget, if only for a night. He followed her back to her apartment, but as soon as the door closed behind them, he felt the crushing weight of what he was doing. Her hands were on him, her lips at his neck, but all he could see was Claire's face, hear her voice telling him she was better off without him. Ethan pulled away abruptly, mumbling an awkward apology and leaving her standing there, confused and annoyed. The walk back to his car in the drizzling rain was long and shameful. He felt like he had hit rock bottom, and the emptiness inside him only grew. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a message from a mutual friend of his and Claire's. "Hey man, just wanted to check in. Heard about you and Claire. Hope you holding up. Ethan stared at the message, his stomach twisting into knots. He had not told anyone about the divorce yet. The thought of Claire already controlling the narrative, sharing the news with their friends, painting herself as the rational protagonist while he was left to be the pitiful, blindsided husband, made his blood boil. He replied curtly, "Thanks. Fine." But he was not fine. He was drowning, and every attempt to reach for solid ground only seemed to pull him deeper into the undertow. The days stretched into weeks, each one blending into the next. Ethan went through the motions at work, avoiding eye contact with his colleagues who no doubt whispered about his sudden lack of enthusiasm and the way his usually crisp button-downs had started to look disheveled. At home, the silence was unbearable. He avoided the master bedroom, opting to sleep on the sectional most nights. The bed felt too big without Claire in it, and the thought of lying there alone was too much to bear. One evening, as he was mindlessly flipping through channels on the TV, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a social media update. Claire has changed her relationship status to single. Ethan stared at the screen, his chest tightening. It was such a small thing, a digital toggle, but it felt monumental. She was moving on, broadcasting her freedom to the world while he was still stuck in the wreckage of what they had once shared. In a fit of masochistic anger, he opened her profile. Her page was filled with pictures of her smiling, out with friends, looking carefree and happy. It was as if their marriage had never existed. The humiliation of it all was suffocating. Ethan threw his phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the drywall echoing through the empty house. He buried his face in his hands, the tears he had been holding back finally spilling over. He felt abandoned, broken, humiliated, and worst of all, he felt utterly alone. Ethan did not need to look for updates on Clara's life. They came to him unbidden every time he opened his phone. It started subtly, like a dull ache that gradually turned into a sharp, searing pain. A mutual friend would tag her in a photo, or her name would pop up in the People You May Know section, accompanied by a new profile picture that radiated effortless charm. The first time he stumbled upon her profile after the divorce, it felt like a punch to the gut. Claire had always been private, her posts few and far between, usually centered around their vacations or anniversaries. Now, her page was a parade of vibrant photos and curated captions that painted a picture of a carefree, joyful life. She was at a rooftop party in downtown Seattle, her arm looped around a stranger's shoulder, her head thrown back in laughter against the skyline. In another photo, she was at the beach, her toned body glowing under the sun as she posed with a group of equally radiant people. Each picture seemed designed to tell a specific story. Claire was thriving, untouched by the wreckage she had left behind. Ethan tried to ignore it. He unfollowed her but could not bring himself to block her entirely. It was a self-inflicted wound, the way he kept checking her profile late at night when the loneliness was at its peak. He hated himself for it, but he could not stop. What stung the most were the captions. Each one seemed like a pointed message, though she never mentioned him directly. New beginnings. Same me, just lighter. Some chapters close so new adventures can begin. Surround yourself with people who remind you how amazing life can be. Her words cut deeper than anything she had said during their last conversation. The implication was clear, leaving Ethan was not just a difficult decision, it was an upgrade. The comments were worse. Friends, people he had known too, piled on the praise. "You look incredible, Claire." One wrote. "This is your glow-up era," said another. The attention seemed endless, each new post garnering dozens of likes and comments that fed into the narrative of Clara's perfect new life. Ethan avoided after-work happy hours and weekend gatherings where he might run into mutual acquaintances, but the whispers reached him nonetheless. "Have you seen Claire's Instagram? She's really living it up," one friend mentioned during a lunch break, oblivious to the way Ethan's jaw tightened as he focused intently on his sandwich. The real humiliation came when his co-workers started to notice. One gray Tuesday morning, as Ethan sat in his glass-walled office staring at a spreadsheet, a colleague knocked lightly on the doorframe before stepping in. "Hey man," Josh began, his tone overly casual, leaning against the desk. "Just wanted to see if you okay." Ethan looked up, genuinely confused. Why would not I be? Josh hesitated, then gestured vaguely with his coffee cup. "You know. With everything." It did not take long for Ethan to realize that his private pain had somehow become office gossip. Someone must have seen Claire's posts or heard through the grapevine about the divorce proceedings, and now it was public knowledge in the tight-knit Seattle tech community. The pitying glances by the espresso machine, the awkward silences when he walked into conference rooms, they were suffocating. Meanwhile, Claire's online presence only grew. Her posts became bolder, more extravagant. She went skydiving over Snohomish one weekend and posted a reel of herself screaming with exhilaration as she jumped from the plane. "Sometimes you just have to let go," the caption read. Ethan could not help but feel it was a direct jab at him. She started tagging new people in her posts, people he did not recognize. One man, in particular, appeared in several photos, always positioned just a little too close for comfort. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident, blindingly white grin that seemed to say, "I've won." Ethan hated him without knowing a single thing about him. The breaking point came when Claire posted a photo of herself at a lavish dinner at the Pink Door, her hand delicately resting on a glass of Pinot Noir. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to leave the wrong things behind to find what truly makes you happy." Ethan stared at the screen, his chest tightening. The comments poured in. "You deserve it, girl." One read, "Out with the old, in with the new." For the first time since the divorce, anger overpowered his sadness. He picked up his phone and typed a message to her, his fingers trembling. "Is this really necessary? Do you need to flaunt your perfect life for everyone to see? It's humiliating." The text sat on his screen for a long moment before he aggressively tapped the backspace button until it was gone. What was the point? She would not care. Instead, Ethan turned to the only outlet he had left, the gym. He threw himself into grueling workouts, pushing his body to its absolute limits as if he could sweat out the humiliation. It helped briefly, but the moment he walked out into the cool night air, the emptiness returned. One day, as he was scrolling through his phone during a rare moment of calm, he stumbled across a post that froze him in place. Claire was with a group of people at what looked like a networking event in South Lake Union. She was standing next to the man from her other photos, their shoulders touching as they smiled for the camera. The caption read, "Grateful to be surrounded by people who inspire me every day." Ethan put his phone down face first on the table, his hands shaking. He felt like a spectator in a cruel play, forced to watch as Claire constructed a life that seemed tailor-made to mock him. But as he stared at the mental image of the photo, something about Claire's smile caught his attention. It was too perfect. Too polished. The Claire he had known for 10 years rarely smiled like that. Her real smiles were soft, unguarded, the kind that crinkled her nose and made her eyes light up. This smile was different. Calculated. Like a mask. Ethan leaned back, the realization sinking in. As much as Claire's posts hurt him, they also felt performative. The constant updates, the perfectly curated captions, the endless parade of new faces, it all seemed unnatural. Forced. For the first time, Ethan felt a glimmer of something other than pain. Maybe Claire's perfect new life was not as perfect as she wanted everyone to believe. Maybe she was trying just as hard to convince herself as she was to convince the world. But that thought brought little comfort. For now, all Ethan could do was endure the humiliation and hope that someday the wound she had left behind would begin to heal. Ethan had not meant to care anymore. He tried to bury his curiosity under layers of detachment, telling himself Claire's life was her business now. But even without seeking it out, the cracks in Claire's perfect facade began to reach him, seeping through the network of shared acquaintances and mutual friends like whispered secrets. The first hint came from a mutual friend, Jen, who called Ethan unexpectedly one evening. They had not spoken much since the divorce, and he almost did not answer, but curiosity won out. "Hey," Jen began, her voice hesitant. "I know this is a little awkward, but I thought you should know. Claire is not doing as well as she's making it look." Ethan frowned, unsure of how to respond. He did not want to care, but the weight of her words tugged at him. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to sound disinterested. Jen hesitated, then sighed loudly. "She's been partying a lot. You know, like, every weekend. And not just casual nights out. Full-blown benders. She's hanging around with these people who, well, let us just say they're not exactly the most grounded crowd." Ethan did not know what to say. The image Jen painted did not match the confident, glowing Claire he had seen in her social media posts. "It's none of my business," Ethan finally said, though the words felt hollow. Maybe not, Jen replied carefully. But I thought you should know. She's been asking people for money lately. Says she's between jobs, but I do not know. Something does not feel right. The conversation left Ethan unsettled. He did not want to revel in Clara's struggles. Despite everything, he was not that kind of person, but there was something vindicating about the cracks beginning to show in her carefully curated image. Over the next few weeks, more stories began to filter through. Friends who had once fawned over Clara's Instagram posts started to notice the discrepancies. One friend, Megan, mentioned how Claire had borrowed money from her under the pretense of needing it for unexpected medical expenses, but was later spotted at an exclusive nightclub in Bellevue, sipping on $20 cocktails. I felt so stupid, Megan confessed to Ethan during a chance encounter at the grocery store. I really thought she needed help, but now it feels like she's just using people. Others began to distance themselves from Claire as well. The vibrant group of friends who had populated her feed started to dwindle, replaced by newer faces, people who seemed just as fleeting as the lifestyle Claire was trying to maintain. Ethan could not ignore the irony. For all the freedom Claire had claimed to seek, she seemed more trapped than ever, ensnared in a cycle of shallow relationships and reckless spending. One evening, Ethan received a message from another mutual acquaintance, a guy named Justin. "Hey man, weird question," the text read. "Did Claire ever get really careless with money when you were together? Just wondering." Ethan stared at the message, his curiosity piqued. He replied cautiously, "Not really." "Why?" Justin's response came quickly. "She owes me $500. Said she'd pay me back last month, but now she's dodging my calls. Just wondering if this is a pattern." Ethan did not know how to reply. On one hand, it was not his problem. On the other, it felt like yet another confirmation of the house of cards Claire had been building. As the weeks went on, the whispers grew louder. Claire's life was not the dazzling adventure she had made it out to be. She had been let go from her PR job, a fact she had not mentioned in her carefully crafted captions, and was living off borrowed money and maxed-out credit cards. The trips, the parties, the new clothes, it was all teetering on the edge of collapse. The man Ethan had noticed in her photos, the one he had quietly resented, turned out to be little more than a fling. Someone later mentioned he had ended things with Claire after realizing she was too much drama. Ethan found himself torn between pity and grim satisfaction. He had not wanted her to fail, not really, but there was a part of him that could not help but feel validated as her shiny new life began to crumble under its own weight. The final blow to Claire's image came during a party she had thrown to celebrate her freedom. It was meant to be an extravagant affair, a showcase of her new life and independence. But instead, it became a spectacle of excess and desperation. Mutual friends who attended the party described it to Ethan afterward. Claire had rented an upscale venue near the waterfront, complete with a DJ and an open bar, but the crowd was sparse. The few people who showed up were acquaintances, not close friends, and the atmosphere was painfully awkward. Honestly, it felt kind of sad, one friend admitted to Ethan. She was trying so hard to make it seem like she was having the time of her life, but you could tell she was barely holding it together. By the end of the night, Claire had drunk herself into a stupor, her laughter too loud and her movements unsteady. Someone overheard her arguing with the venue staff about the bill, which she had not been able to fully cover. She was slurring her words, trying to convince them she'd have the money in a few days. The friend recounted that it was physically uncomfortable to watch. Ethan listened to these stories with a mix of emotions. He did not relish Clara's humiliation, but he could not deny the sense of closure it brought. For months he had watched her flaunt her so-called happiness, while he had been left to pick up the pieces of his life. Now, the tables had turned. Clara's social media presence dwindled after that night. The posts became less frequent, the captions less triumphant, and eventually, she stopped posting altogether. Ethan did not feel victorious. If anything, he felt a deep sense of sadness, for Claire, for their failed marriage, and for the illusions they had both clung to in different ways. But as he reflected on everything that had happened, he realized something important: her downfall was not his responsibility. Claire had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. For the first time since their divorce proceedings began, Ethan felt a glimmer of peace. Clara's perfect new life had been a mirage, and while it had taken time, the truth had finally come to light. Now all that remained was for Ethan to move forward, stronger, wiser, and unshackled from the weight of her shadow. Ethan's recovery was neither swift nor straightforward. It began in the silence of his now empty house, with nights spent staring at the ceiling, grappling with the echoes of Clara's departure, her cutting words, her betrayal, and the humiliation of watching her parade her so-called happiness while nodding at him from a screen. But eventually, Ethan reached a breaking point, a realization that he could not keep living in a haunted house. It started small. He cleaned out the house, room by room. Every drawer and closet was purged of the remnants of Clara's presence. Her things had long been taken by the movers, but the ghost of her lingered in the spaces they had shared. He donated what he could to Goodwill, threw out what he could not, and hired a crew to paint the walls a new color, a deep, calming slate blue. It was symbolic, a quiet declaration that this was his space now. With the house reclaimed, Ethan turned his focus inward. The gym, once just a place to sweat out anger and frustration, became a sanctuary. His workouts grew more disciplined, his body stronger. Each rep on the bench press felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming the confidence Clara's rejection had shattered. He pushed himself at work, too. Where once he had merely gone through the motions, now he poured himself into his projects. Late nights and early mornings paid off. Within months, Ethan was promoted to director. His colleagues, who had once whispered about his humiliation by the water cooler, now looked at him with newfound respect. But Ethan knew that rebuilding his life could not stop at his career or his physique. He needed to reconnect with the world, a world that did not include Claire. He started saying yes to invitations he once would have declined, joining co-workers for happy hour drinks in Capitol Hill and reconnecting with old college buddies. At first, it felt awkward, like trying on a winter coat that did not quite fit, but as the weeks passed, Ethan found himself genuinely enjoying the company of others. One evening at a friend's dinner party in Ballard, he met a woman named Leah. She was kind, with an easy laugh and a sharp wit that reminded Ethan what it felt like to enjoy someone else's company without the crushing weight of expectations. They talked late into the evening over glasses of Cabernet, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark of something he thought he had lost. Leah was not a savior, and Ethan was not looking for one. She was simply someone who made him realize that life could be full again, not because of someone else, but because he had rebuilt himself from the ground up. Clara's name occasionally surfaced in conversations, whispered by mutual acquaintances who had not gotten the memo that Ethan did not care. He heard about her struggles, her dwindling social circle, and the financial mess she had created for herself. He listened politely, nodding, but felt no need to engage. She was a chapter of his life that had closed, and he no longer needed to revisit it. The turning point came on a sunny Saturday afternoon as Ethan stood in his newly redecorated kitchen, preparing lunch. KXB played softly on the radio in the background, sunlight streaming through the windows, a rare treat in Seattle. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan felt content. Not euphoric, not ecstatic, just quietly, peacefully content. He thought about how far he had come since Claire had walked out, leaving him broken and humiliated. He had rebuilt his confidence, reconnected with friends, and achieved milestones in his career he had not thought possible. Most importantly, he had rediscovered himself, the person he had been before Claire, and the person he was now, stronger and more self-assured. For the first time, Ethan felt no bitterness, no anger. Only gratitude for the life he was living. Claire had left him in ruins, but Ethan had built something better from the rubble. It was that same quiet Saturday afternoon when Ethan heard the knock at his front door. He was not expecting anyone. He set down his coffee mug and hesitated for a moment before walking to the foyer to answer it. The sight on the other side stunned him. Claire stood there, her face streaked with tears, her once perfect composure in shambles. Her hair was unkempt, pulled back in a messy loop, her makeup smudged, and the confident glow she had worn during her perfect new life was completely gone. She looked small, huddled in a rain jacket that looked too thin for the chill. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you." For a moment, he could not speak. He had not seen Claire in person since the day she left. The memories of that cold conversation at the kitchen table came flooding back, but now, she looked nothing like the Claire who had walked out so decisively. "What are you doing here, Claire?" Ethan asked, his tone guarded, his hand still on the doorframe. She let out a shaky breath, clutching her purse tightly as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I did not know where else to go," Her voice broke, and she stepped closer, invading his personal space. I made a mistake, Ethan. A huge mistake. Ethan stepped aside reluctantly, allowing her to enter. He could not help but notice how defeated she seemed as she moved past him into the living room. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant, self-assured woman she had pretended to be in her social media posts. She looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the changes he had made, the new paint, the rearranged furniture. It was all a reflection of the life he had rebuilt without her. You've changed so much, she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan stayed silent, leaning against the archway, waiting for her to explain why she was there. Finally, she sank onto the edge of the slate-blue sofa, burying her face in her hands. I thought I wanted freedom, she began, her voice muffled. I thought I was doing what was best for me. But I've been so wrong. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. None of it made me happy, Ethan. Not the parties, not the people. Nothing. Ethan crossed his arms, his posture relaxed but firm. He was not sure what to feel. Pity? Anger? Satisfaction? What do you want from me, Claire? She let out a sob, her hands gripping her knees. I want to come back. I want us to try again. I know I do not deserve it, but I see I not do this anymore. I was so blind, and I did not see how much I had until I lost it. Until I lost you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. A part of Ethan might have once longed to hear her say those things, to admit her mistake and come crawling back. But now, as he looked at her, all he felt was a strange, cool detachment. Claire, he said, his voice steady. When you left, you made it clear that I was not what you wanted. You told me you'd be better off on your own. I was wrong. She interrupted, her voice rising in panic. I was selfish and stupid, and I thought I needed something new. But I was wrong. You were everything, Ethan. You still are. He shook his head slowly, a sad smile forming on his lips. No, Claire. I'm not. I was never everything to you, and I'm not going to be again. Her face crumpled, and she reached out as though to touch his arm, but he stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. You do not understand, she pleaded, the tears flowing freely now. I've lost everything. I'm broke. I'm alone. And I do not know what to do. Her admission stung, not because he wanted her back, but because it confirmed what he had suspected all along. Her return was not about him. It was about her need to escape the mess she had made of her life. She was not looking for a husband, she was looking for a lifeline. I'm sorry you're going through that, Ethan said, his voice soft but firm. But you need to figure it out on your own. I've moved on, Claire. I've built something better for myself, and I'm not going to let you drag me back into the past. Claire's tears fell harder, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Ethan, please. We were together for 10 years. Does not that mean anything? It did, he said, his tone unyielding. But that chapter is over. You ended it. And now so have I. He walked to the front door and opened it, waiting for her to leave. For a moment, she sat frozen, as though she could not believe what was happening. Then slowly, she stood, her head bowed in defeat. As she stepped outside onto the porch, into the cool Seattle air, she turned back to him one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Ethan nodded, his expression calm. I know. But it's too late. He closed the door behind her and stood there for a long moment, the silence of the house wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. He felt no anger, no sadness. Only a deep, abiding sense of closure. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly free. And that concludes our story today. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked it, please give it a like and leave a comment. Also, we are always happy to discuss any comments you may have. See you in the next video.